Something just happened in Malaysia that Washington never saw coming, and it's going to completely reshape North American trade. Prime Minister Mark Carney walked into an Asian summit and got a standing ovation. Not polite applause, a standing ovation. From leaders representing over 650 million people and a $4 trillion economy. While Trump was threatening more tariffs back in Washington, Canada was shaking hands with Asia's fastest-growing markets. This wasn't a diplomatic courtesy visit. This was Canada announcing it no longer needs American permission to build its economic future. For decades, Canada sent 75% of its exports to the United States. That dependence gave Washington enormous leverage: tariffs on steel, tariffs on aluminum, constant threats about trade policy. Canada absorbed it all because it had no choice. The American market was everything. That just changed. And the timing couldn't be more strategic. Mark Carney's Asia trip wasn't random. He chose the ASEAN summit specifically to send a message. Canada is diversifying away from the United States, and it's doing it fast. Within 10 years, Ottawa plans to increase non-U.S. exports by 300 billion Canadian dollars. That's not a vague promise. That's a measurable economic strategy designed to break Canada's dependence on American trade. The ASEAN region represents the perfect partner, growing at 4.5% annually according to the International Monetary Fund. Hungry for energy, critical minerals, and clean technology, everything Canada produces in abundance. Regional newspapers called Canada a dependable new voice in an uncertain world. Delegates praised Ottawa's commitment to rules-based trade systems. The contrast with Trump's transactional approach couldn't have been clearer. Here's what makes this pivot so powerful. Canada isn't just talking about trade deals, it's backing them with infrastructure and investment. The country is projected to export 50 million tons of LNG annually by 2030. 85% of its power grid is already clean energy, and Ottawa just pledged to quadruple defense and tech spending over 5 years, focusing on artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and advanced manufacturing. This is industrial policy at scale: energy security, critical minerals, digital infrastructure, all packaged into one unified strategy aimed directly at Asian markets. And every deal signed with Japan, South Korea, or ASEAN members reduces the percentage of Canadian trade tied to the United States. For Washington, this was never part of the plan. Trump's America First trade policy was designed to strengthen U.S. dominance in North America. The tariff strategy was supposed to force allies like Canada into compliance. Instead, it's pushing them toward independence. When the United States closed its doors, Canada opened new ones across the Pacific. Trade analysts at the Peterson Institute noted that tariff escalation is actively diverting investment and supply chains toward non-U.S. partners. That shift is already visible. Canadian exports to Indo-Pacific economies hit $261 billion in 2024. New agreements with the European Union, Japan, and ASEAN could add hundreds of billions more within a decade. The symbolism of Carney's trip resonated globally. European financial newspapers called it Canada's diplomatic breakout. The Financial Times reported that his Indo-Pacific initiative could attract over 500 billion Canadian dollars in combined investment over the next decade. That's not speculation. That's based on Asia's demand for the exact resources Canada controls. Global investors are taking notice. The Toronto Stock Exchange Resource and Tech Index has outperformed the S&P 500 since mid-2025, driven by optimism over Asian demand for Canadian minerals, energy, and clean technology. Canada is no longer seen as an extension of the U.S. economy. It's viewed as a Pacific gateway for Western capital. And then Trump invited Carney to the Oval Office. What happened next was remarkable for all the wrong reasons. The meeting was supposed to showcase progress on trade negotiations. Instead, it became a masterclass in contrast. Trump spoke to the cameras. Carney spoke to the facts. By the end, Trump's own words had undermined his America First message more than any Canadian policy ever could. When reporters asked about trade, Trump jumped between topics: cars, steel, crime, border security, drug boats supposedly destroyed off Venezuela. He claimed the United States now had no fishing boats left because of maritime drug enforcement. None of it connected to tariffs or trade policy. Then came the numbers. Trump claimed more than $17 trillion of new investment had poured into the United States in 8 months. The Bureau of Economic Analysis shows U.S. foreign direct investment for all of 2024 was under $500 billion. The claim was off by over 3,000%. Through it all, Carney stayed silent. When he did speak, his message was disciplined. Canada is America's second-largest trading partner, $500 billion invested in the U.S. over 5 years. Clear, factual, structured. Trump responded with flattery. He called Carney a great man and a strong leader multiple times. When a reporter asked why there was still no trade deal if Carney was so great, Trump smiled and said, "Because I want to be great too." The laughter was polite but uncomfortable. Carney smiled lightly and let the silence speak. In that moment, the power dynamic was obvious. Canada had leverage. The United States had chaos. The meeting ended with no deal, no policy shift, no breakthrough. But it revealed something crucial. Trump's tariff strategy is backfiring. The same barriers meant to project dominance are isolating America from its closest ally. Meanwhile, Canada is building alternative trade networks across Asia that will last generations. What started as America First is becoming America Alone, and Canada's pivot to Asia isn't just a response to Trump's trade policy. It's proof that middle powers can shape their own destiny when superpowers overplay their hand. The question now isn't whether Canada's Asia strategy will succeed. It's how much economic power will shift north while Washington remains distracted by its own trade war.